To live richly is not to possess more, but to need less. For the Stoics taught that abundance is not measured by what is owned, but by the freedom of the mind that refuses to be enslaved by desire. And in this truth lies the art of living with unshakable wealth. Imagine yourself standing in a marketplace of ancient Rome, where merchants shout and coins clatter, where fine fabrics gleam under the sun and jewels sparkle like fragments of captured stars. Yet amid this dazzling display, a single philosopher in a simple cloak walks serenely, unmoved by the glitter that enslaves so many others. He smiles gently, not because he has acquired, but because he has learned the power of renouncing, and in that renunciation he holds more than the wealthiest senator. This image invites us into the heart of the Stoic art of needing less, an art that offers not only inner peace, but also a form of richness that cannot be stolen by fortune or fate. To walk this path requires us to challenge everything society tells us about prosperity, to question whether a life overflowing with possessions is truly abundant, or whether it is a prison disguised as luxury. The Stoics insisted that the more we crave, the more we suffer. For every desire is a chain, and the pursuit of endless acquisition leaves the soul restless, exhausted, and perpetually incomplete. By contrast, the one who has reduced desire to its simplest form walks lightly upon the earth, free to savor the present moment and to find wealth in the smallest of things, like the taste of bread, the warmth of the sun on the skin, or the presence of a loyal friend. This philosophy does not glorify poverty, nor does it condemn the enjoyment of material things, but it reveals a subtler truth. That true abundance flows, not from the pile of goods we hoard, but from the discipline with which we learn to master our wants. Consider how easily the modern world entices us with images of perfect lives, endless gadgets, sprawling homes, and gleaming cars that promise happiness if only we acquire them. Yet behind these promises lies a cycle without end. Each acquisition sparks joy for a fleeting moment, before fading into the dull background of habit, leaving us hungry for the next purchase, the next upgrade, the next illusion of progress. The Stoics saw through this centuries ago, warning that he who needs much is never satisfied, while he who learns to need little is invincible. For no thief can rob him, and no fortune can undo his contentment. To live by needing less is therefore an act of courage, for it resists the tide of culture that equates identity with possessions. And it is also an act of liberation, for it places the reins of happiness back into our own hands. Picture a man waking in a simple room with bare walls and little furniture. Yet he rises with joy, because his heart is not cluttered by envy or craving. And when he steps outside to walk beneath the morning light, he feels himself to be the richest of all, though his purse may be empty. Such richness is invisible to those who measure worth in numbers and possessions, but it is a richness that expands with every moment of awareness and gratitude. The Stoic art of needing less begins in the mind, with the discipline of reflection, the practice of asking whether what we chase is truly necessary, or whether it is a distraction from the essence of living. When we slow down to examine our desires, we find that many of them are borrowed, planted in us by others, by advertisements, by the voices of comparison. And once we recognize this, the chains begin to loosen. The philosopher Seneca urged his students to rehearse poverty, to spend a few days with the simplest of food and the roughest of clothing, and to ask in that state whether such a life was truly unbearable, and in discovering that it was not, they would return to their daily lives with a profound sense of freedom. For the one who has tasted simplicity without fear is no longer terrified of losing wealth, and the one who no longer fears loss is already untouchable. In this way, needing less becomes not only a strategy for peace, but also a shield against the unpredictable storms of fortune. Wealth can vanish overnight, empires collapse, markets crash, but the inner abundance of one who requires little remains untouched. Imagine standing in a grand palace that suddenly crumbles, leaving only dust and ruin, Yet the philosopher in his simple cloak walks out unshaken, for his true home was never in the palace, but in the fortress of his own mind. This vision may feel distant, yet it speaks directly to us. For we too live in an age where fortunes rise and fall, where possessions are fragile, and where the craving for more leaves many hollow even amid abundance. To practice the Stoic art of needing less is to cultivate resilience in the face of uncertainty, to find steadiness when others tremble, and to embrace joy, not as a rare guest, but as a constant companion born of gratitude. This gratitude arises when we cease comparing our lives to what we do not have, and instead honor what already surrounds us: the breath we draw, the water we drink, the companionship of others, the silence of the night, and the beauty of a single star in the sky. To honor these simple gifts is to enter a realm of richness that no amount of luxury can surpass, for luxury often blinds while simplicity opens the eyes. The Stoics knew that death comes for all, that time is fleeting, and that to spend life chasing endless acquisition is to squander the brief gift we are given. Instead, they invited us to align our desires with what nature itself offers freely, to live in harmony with what is necessary and to discard the rest as noise. When we accept this invitation, the world transforms, for suddenly we see that what we once considered lacking was in truth already abundant, and that our restlessness was born not of scarcity but of illusion. We realize that the richest person is not the one who owns the most, but the one who requires the least, and that this richness cannot be taxed, stolen, or diminished, for it exists within. To cultivate this way of living demands daily practice, for the temptations of society are loud and constant, and yet every time we say no to an unnecessary desire, we strengthen the walls of our inner citadel. Over time, this citadel becomes unassailable, and in its quiet chambers we discover joy that no empire could grant. As you walk through your own days, consider how many of your wants are truly your own, and how many have been whispered into you by the endless chorus of comparison. Ask yourself, what would remain if all possessions vanished? And if the answer is still enough, then you have already grasped the secret of Stoic wealth. This journey is not about rejecting all comfort, but about mastering the art of discernment, learning when comfort serves us and when it enslaves us. In that balance lies the wisdom of needing less, and in that wisdom lies the richest life imaginable. The art of needing less is not a retreat into bleakness, but an expansion into clarity. For when desires are stripped away, the world reveals itself in sharper colors and deeper textures, and life becomes a canvas filled with wonders that were always present, yet hidden beneath layers of craving. Imagine standing beside a river at dusk, the water flowing steadily, the air cool and fragrant, and realizing that in that single moment you possess everything needed to feel whole. No palace could add to it. No jewel could intensify it, and no banquet could surpass it, for the richness lies not in adding but in awakening. The Stoics believed that this awakening required discipline, that the mind, left untamed, would rush toward excess, and so they trained themselves to pause, to breathe, and to question each impulse. They understood that wealth without control is a burden, like a heavy ship overloaded with cargo that sinks under its own weight. But wealth tempered by wisdom becomes a vessel that glides lightly and steadily across the sea. Seneca warned that it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor. And this paradox cuts sharply against the illusions of the modern age. We live surrounded by abundance greater than any emperor of the ancient world, yet the hunger for more remains insatiable, leaving many restless even in their apparent prosperity. The Stoic path shows another way, where freedom is found not in acquisition, but in liberation from compulsion, and where joy blossoms naturally when we cease to chase it. To practice this way of living is to reclaim power from the outside world and to place it within, for then happiness is no longer hostage to the whims of fortune. Imagine losing all possessions in a sudden fire, yet still standing firm, grateful for the breath in your lungs and the strength in your body, ready to rebuild without despair. That is the power of needing less, for it shields us from fear. And where there is no fear, there is peace. This peace is not passive but radiant, filling each day with purpose. For the one who is no longer enslaved by desire is free to dedicate energy to higher pursuits, to wisdom, to friendship, to service, to contemplation of the eternal. Such pursuits enrich the soul in ways no possession could ever equal, and they leave a legacy that endures beyond the span of one life. Marcus Aurelius, clothed in the robes of an emperor, yet writing in the solitude of his tent, reminded himself that man needs little to live well, and that contentment lies in aligning oneself with reason and virtue. His words echo across the centuries, calling us to remember that even the most powerful ruler found his greatest strength in simplicity. To embrace this simplicity today requires courage, for to need less is to resist the tide of consumerism that shouts at us from every corner, insisting that we are incomplete without the next purchase. It is to choose silence in a world of noise, stillness in a world of rushing, and gratitude in a world of endless comparison. This choice is not easy, but every act of resistance strengthens us, and over time the rewards multiply in ways unseen. The burden of debt lifts, the anxiety of keeping pace with others fades, and in its place arises a steady calm, a joy that does not flicker with every new desire. Imagine your life like a garden, overrun with weeds of craving, each one demanding water and sunlight, choking the flowers of peace and contentment. To practice the Stoic art of needing less is to pull these weeds one by one, sometimes painfully, sometimes with effort, but always with clarity, until the garden begins to bloom again with beauty that was hidden all along. Each flower is a moment of genuine joy, a friendship, a sunrise, a breath of fresh air, and as the weeds vanish, you realize that richness was always within reach. The journey does not end here, for life will always test us, fortune will always rise and fall, and desire will always whisper. Yet the one who has trained the mind to need less is unshaken by these tests, like a tree rooted deeply that bends with the storm but does not break. This resilience is the true treasure, greater than gold, greater than any empire, for it grants us mastery over ourselves. To live richly by needing less is to write our own definition of wealth, one that cannot be corrupted by greed or envy. It is to stand at the end of our days and know that we did not waste our time chasing illusions, but instead embraced the fullness of what was already ours. As you reflect on your own life, consider what desires still enslave you and imagine the freedom that would come from releasing them. Ask yourself whether the next possession you crave will truly bring peace, or whether peace is already waiting silently within, if only you learn to listen. The Stoic art of needing less is not merely a philosophy, but a way of being, a light to guide us through the shadows of endless craving. It is an invitation to live richly not tomorrow, not when we acquire more, but here and now, in the simple miracle of existence. And so the question remains, not whether you can live richly by needing less, but whether you are willing to step into that freedom and claim the treasure that has always been within your reach. To walk this path of richness through simplicity is to embrace the paradox that less truly becomes more. For in discarding the unnecessary, we uncover treasures that were hidden beneath the weight of excess. The sound of laughter among friends becomes music enough. The taste of simple food becomes a feast when savored with gratitude. And the sight of dawn breaking over the horizon becomes a spectacle grander than any display of jewels. The Stoics knew that the soul is nourished not by what is stored in vaults, but by what is experienced with clarity and presence. And in this lies the art of living well. Imagine a life where every object you possess serves a purpose, where nothing is owned merely to impress or to compete, but where each possession is a tool rather than a chain, and every day feels lighter because you carry only what is essential. This vision is not only attainable, but profoundly liberating, for in the shedding of excess, we find time, energy, and attention to devote to what truly matters. A parent who needs less can give more presents to their children. A friend who needs less can offer more loyalty, and a thinker who needs less can offer more wisdom, for they are not distracted by the noise of endless cravings. Seneca reminded his students that wealth consists not in great possessions, but in few wants. And when we meditate on this, we realize that the richest moments of our lives were rarely born of possessions, but of experiences, of love, of courage, of truth. To need less is therefore not a loss, but a return to the essence of being human, where joy is found in connection, in growth, and in alignment with nature itself. Picture yourself at the end of a long day, weary but content, sitting quietly in a modest room with a single candle burning, and realizing that in this stillness there is more wealth than in all the banquets of kings. This is not an act of denial, but of revelation, the uncovering of abundance that was always present, awaiting the eyes that can see it. The Stoic practice of needing less also sharpens our moral character, for when we are no longer ruled by desire, we cannot be corrupted by bribes, we cannot be swayed by envy, and we cannot be enslaved by greed. We become sovereign within ourselves, unshakable and free, and this sovereignty is the crown of true wealth. Even in times of hardship, this freedom sustains us, for when circumstances strip away possessions, the one who has already mastered the art of needing little stands unbroken, smiling at fate with calm acceptance. Marcus Aurelius reflected often on the fleeting nature of life, reminding himself that both the rich and the poor are carried to the same end, and so the true measure of life is not in what is amassed, but in how it is lived. To live richly by needing less is to prepare for that final moment without fear, knowing that nothing essential can ever be taken from us. The stars above, the wisdom within, the bonds of friendship, and the serenity of a mind at peace, these remain untouched by time and fortune. As the journey slows to its close, let us stand once more in that ancient marketplace, where merchants still call and jewels still glitter, and watch as the philosopher in his simple cloak passes by. He does not scorn the wealth around him, nor does he envy it, but he carries within himself a treasure far greater, a treasure built of discipline, clarity, and freedom. He reminds us that the richest life is not one of excess, but one of essence, not one of restless craving, but of steady contentment, and that this treasure is available to all who are willing to master desire and embrace simplicity. So the lasting question echoes: will you spend your days chasing what fades, or will you dare to live richly by needing less, discovering in that daring the wealth that no world can take away?